Entering the Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2022 USFL DraftKings Picks, full preview of the game and the league itself. This is the thing that is starting on Saturday, so now that we have tools available to us, now that we have salaries available on DraftKings, odds to bet on this, it's time to learn something about the USFL. Does Pat Mayo know much about the USFL? Absolutely not. No, I do not. So I had to get the people on the ground and the people who've been doing the research for this to come in and tell me. Reminder to everyone out there right now to go to runthesims.com and get the USFL package. It's $99 for the entire season. Use code Mayo or /Mayo at the end. You get 10% off. And I think it's going to be pretty helpful when we go into this. Cody Main from Establish the Run is joining me on the line, as is Justin Freeman of Run the Sims, who's in Alabama at the USFL training facility right now. Boots on the ground. Justin, what have you learned?
Yeah, we've been bouncing around. I've been using my kid as an excuse to spark up conversations with different USFL players and just trying to pick their brain about what they expect to have happen from their team. We're getting some peeps behind the scenes in some of these practices as well. So it's been a lot of fun, honestly, getting to Uber my way around Birmingham because the way they're set up here, all 8 teams are essentially bubbled here, like COVID NBA style, but not obviously for those same reasons. It's really just for logistical reasons. All 8 teams located right here in Birmingham. Every single game of the season will be played here at either Protective Stadium or Legion Field here in Birmingham. So if you're going to want to see any USFL live, you're going to have to come to Alabama like I did. And so we're here and we're having a lot of fun learning our way around this group here. But all the teams staying at one hotel, so it makes it really convenient to bump into players and pick their brain a little bit.
So, Cody, obviously, when it comes to these sports, it's like when you and I spoke in the preseason about the NFL, that just having knowledge of the depth chart is such a huge advantage for something like this. How have you been able to discover what's going on through your team previews?
Yeah, and what Justin is doing is a phenomenal use of his time, and it seems like he's getting really good information. So I'm a little jealous that I'm still stuck in mom's basement down here recording with you while Justin is in Alabama getting the real alpha. But basically where you start is you look at the depth charts, and I think you kind of have to start with this league being brand new with draft capital. And I think that's a starting point initially, but before we have real information on these guys, just looking at where they were drafted, theoretically, if a guy was drafted higher than somebody else in his same position group, he's going to have a leg up on playing time and therefore a leg up on opportunities. And then from there, you just kind of have to look at how they've performed at previous iterations of football. A lot of these guys played in the AAF. A lot of these guys played in the XFL. Of course, they all played in college. Were they productive there? Were they able to earn targets on their teams there? Did they have a high percentage of the team's rushing share at those previous levels? So once you start to kind of parse through that information, you can start to see which guys may separate in terms of their ability to earn targets. Obviously, the stuff that Justin's doing, actually talking to players, viewing practices, it's going to be helpful in understanding which guys will be on the field come week 1. And then from there, hopefully we're making small mistakes without the data at our hands, make small mistakes in week 1, do the best we can to survive and advance to week 2. And then when we get into week 2 and beyond, we should have some actual data to work with and understand which guys are actually going to be the target getters and the guys that get the carries on their team.
So, Justin, when this happened last time and the XFL started, you cleaned up at this kind of thing. What is it about these niche type sports where computer optimization, which is we're going to have at Run the Sims, why is that so important for something like this? Is it because it takes the idea that, hey, everyone just like with the NFL, I know who the quarterback is, I know who he throws to, I know who the running back is, I know how to stack this all together. Not that I do it all that well, but at least I have that idea. It seems like 98% of people are going to be blind to playing this, but they're going to be playing it, and in week 1, there's $100,000 up top on DraftKings.
I couldn't believe it, Pat. I know Cody and I were both probably doing happy dances as soon as that $100K GPP got posted, we were a little nervous because it does seem like the USFL is lagging just a little bit in terms of excitement behind the XFL. But boom, right away, week 1, 100K up top. So go ahead and fill that thing so we can get it again next week. But to answer your question, the reason you can find success in some of these niche sports is it's like truly a working man's game, right? Like you get to go in and really sort of outwork your opponent in terms of like scraping news and driving to Alabama, whatever the situation might be. Like, but I mean, even with XFL, the teams weren't producing depth charts, or at least if they were not reliable. You're kind of going by who saw what, who talked to who seemed to be gimpy in practice. Like, there's a bunch of, ways to sort of grind out this information. And so, by having that really good information into a system like the simulator at Run the Sims, you get a real sense of like what a player's true range of outcomes are. And, one thing I'm noticing here is it's really tough to be able to sort of pencil in exactly who the sort of, in the NFL, you would say the starting 3 receivers for the Cowboys, last year were Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. You could say that pretty definitively because the rosters are pretty big and those guys played all the snaps. Here, the rosters are so thin. Like yesterday, I'm checking out Michigan Panthers, and they really only have like 4 legitimate wide receivers even on the team. So all the guys are going to play. And so it's just kind of unique to think about, what does that mean? If the guys are rotating, is it even possible for one guy to really sort of separate? So it kind of helps you bring those expectations back down to earth a little bit.
So one of the problems that we encountered, Justin, at Run the Sims was this new roster style for DraftKings. It is not set up like the NFL. And Cody, we get 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 of wide receiver / tight end, 2 flexes, and a defense. So I know that both you guys have likely been racking your brains trying to figure out the optimal way to build your lineups. Cody, have you come up with anything yet?
Yeah, this is fantastic news for DFS players and for people that are, grinding out these niche leagues like we did with the XFL. This is the same format that DraftKings rolled out for the XFL. So we do have a little bit of data to work with on that front. And I've been told that this is the same format for CFL, or was the same format for CFL. So if you look back, basically what you'll find using the small sample of XFL data that we have is tight ends are not well represented in winning lineups, and running backs in those flex spots are not well represented in winning lineups. And I think this is something we'll see starting with week 1. A lot of these backfields are going to be backfield by committee for whatever reason, mostly because I think the talent level is pretty similar between all of the backs, but also because you can't run one of your running backs out there for 90% of the team's carries and risk injury and then not have anybody to back them up. These depth charts, as Justin mentioned, are really thin. You don't have a whole lot of bodies if somebody goes down, so you can't risk that type of injury. And then a lot of these coaches just lean on committees naturally. So I think that's the biggest takeaway is in those flex and wide receiver / tight end spots, you're going to be heavily using wide receivers. You're going to end up taking some bad scores, but that's where the ceiling is going to be. And if you're trying to take down this, 100K to first big GPP on DraftKings, you're going to want to have heavy exposure to those wide receivers that have those high ranges of outcomes.
I haven't seen any of the simulations yet. I don't even know if you've run them yet, Justin, but the optimizer will be available hopefully Tuesday evening or Friday morning at Run the Sims with all of the players, all of the pricing, and all of the projections put in there. So once again, runthesims.com/Mayo to go get your hands on that. Plus there's Showdown on DraftKings for these games. We have a Showdown simulator. We have player prop tools. Do you think that Cody's onto something here, that when we look at the flex spots, that mainly the Sims are going to tell us that wide receivers are the key?
Yeah, it should. Obviously the running backs, Sims tend to like running backs because, those are the guys that have the most stable projected volume. The receivers are always going to be a little hit or miss. But, I think Cody's exactly right that the receivers should be a really heavy part of your roster. In this particular format, you have the opportunity to play up to 4 receivers. And so that would be, 2 people in your wide receiver spot and then 2 others in the flex spot. And, you kind of want to utilize a little bit of game theory here. And I think the theory is to essentially say some of these teams are just going to be massively better than other teams. We saw that in the XFL with Houston, the Houston Roughnecks, and to a certain extent later on with the St. Louis Battlehawks. But these guys were just putting up such massive scores compared to the rest of the teams in the league that you really wanted to just go ahead and invest heavily in those teams. So go ahead and throw 4 roster spots. Don't be afraid of that. Throw 4 roster spots on whichever team you're pairing with your quarterback. So, I think a good way to do that is like if you were going to play the Philadelphia Stars as a stack, and that's a team that I'm certainly interested in targeting this week. Brian Scott's the starting quarterback. Jordan Sewell, a really good-looking wide receiver. And then mixing it up there with some of the other players in the offense. You're really just looking for that one team that's this year's Roughnecks that comes in and just sort of separates themselves from the field.
Cody, what do we know about these guys from their previous performances in college or in the XFL or the whatever the hell the other one was on CBS, AAFL? Like, are there certain guys like Jordan Tumau or whatever the hell his name is? He's playing here. He's really good, isn't he?
Yeah, that as Justin alluded to, some of these quarterbacks and some of these teams in general are going to separate from the field as we get into, looking at coaching staffs. And if you've read the team by team previews, looked at the depth charts, you're going to notice that some of these teams and some of these coaching staffs are going to be extremely run heavy. Shout out to Establish the Run. But we will have some of these teams, Brian Scott and the Philadelphia Stars being one of them, Jordan Ta'amu and the Tampa Bay Bandits being another, and then the New Orleans Breakers with Cal Sloter that are going to separate, I think, as pass-heavy teams and teams that are also going to be efficient through the air. And as Justin alluded to, I'm not afraid of stacking up these rosters or stacking up these teams on my DraftKings rosters with 3-4 guys on the same team and just hoping that they're the ones that go out and put up 28, 35, 42 points while some of these other teams come in around 14, 21. We've seen low scores in these leagues in the past. So trying to translate their games from previous leagues is the hardest part, I think, at this point, knowing how the AAF and the XFL in college is going to translate here is difficult. But I think we have a pretty good idea going into week 1, which quarterbacks at least will be kind of the top guys in this league.
So Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and New Orleans, those are the Breakers, the Stars, and the Bandits. Oh, this is fun. This is like when the CFL expanded into America, and you had like the Shreveport Pirates and things like that. So I'm a big fan of these names. Is there anything we can tell from the odds so far, Justin? Because I know that's a big part of both simulations, optimizations, play rates, pass rate, everything like that. Most of these games, I assume, opened at either -3 or +3 to a side. You have the New Jersey Birmingham game. Birmingham's favored by 3 points at DraftKings Sportsbook. 42.5 is the over/under. And then you have is Michigan? Is Michigan a team in this?
That's the team. Yeah, the Panthers. Jeff
right.
Fisher's Panthers.
Okay, so they're going to run a ton, I would assume. They're 2.5-point favorites against the Houston Gamblers. 43.5 is the over/under in that game. The New Orleans Breakers are favored by 2.5 over the Philadelphia Stars. 44 is the over/under in that game. 44 is the highest. 42 is the lowest. That's the Tampa and Pittsburgh Maulers game, but Tampa's favored by 4 in that. Like, what can we tell from that? Like, do we think that every game is just going to inevitably end up that 23-20 and just hit the middle of all of these, or are some of these numbers just way off?
Yeah, I would say that these lines have already been hammered really quickly. All these lines opened above 50 for the totals for all 4 of these games, and they were quickly destroyed. I think Fox Bet put it out strictly to New Jersey customers, if I'm not mistaken, and they were the sacrificial lamb. I'm sure they took a beating before they found out that these over-unders need to be closer to the low 40s. I'm not expecting a ton of dynamic offense from these teams. You're going to be talking about teams running the most vanilla playbook that you could possibly imagine. They've only been a team existing like post-draft for roughly a month at this point, so that's not a lot of time to establish a really intricate playbook with lots of motion and, different types of trick plays and gadgets and that sort of thing. So I think you're going to see it be pretty vanilla to open with. And, truthfully, we don't know how good these teams are. One of the most hilarious lines out there was the Bandits line, I think, Cody? You can correct me if I'm wrong, was that one quickly got flipped. So I think everybody's trying to figure it out. We'll certainly have a lot more information after week 1, but I think everything's pretty close to where it's supposed to be now.
Yeah, so do you think that this is Cody? Like, is this a A good representation of how good these teams are against each other? Or are we going to look at this after the games and be like, oh my God, like this wasn't even close?
I think these lines are a lot better now than where they opened. I think when Fox Bet put out openers, they were all at plus 1.5, minus 1.5. So they had them pegged pretty evenly. And for anyone that had done their work, knew that there were some teams that were going to separate from the jump. And this one, the Tampa Bay Bandits versus the Pittsburgh Maulers, was one that stood out pretty bad from the very beginning. I think the Pittsburgh Maulers are probably one of the bottom barrel teams in this league, and the Tampa Bay Bandits are, I think, the class of the league. So that one now to -4 on DraftKings Sportsbook makes a little bit more sense. As far as the totals go, I think there's still a little bit of room on these unders. We saw this with the XFL. The sportsbooks thought that these teams were going to go out and score points, and some of the offensive rule changes would indicate that. But coaches just aren't maximizing for efficiency in these leagues quite yet. We're not going to see a whole lot of coaches attempt these 2- and 3-point conversions that they've introduced. We certainly won't see many onside kicks or the onside kick alternative, where you can attempt to keep possession with a 4th and 12 play from your 33-yard line. I just think it's going to be another grinded out, low-scoring league, at least from the beginning, until we get some continuity. But I think there's still a little bit of room on these unders where they're at, mid-40s right now.
So Cody hit on this a little bit earlier, Justin, when it comes to getting a data sample and even running it through the tools, running the simulations, that these are all going to be better, at least versus week 1 and week 3 and week 4, once we have an idea of the playing time on these teams. Which offenses are good? What style do they like to play? How much do they run the ball? How much do they pass the ball? How much do these wonky rules really affect the overall scoring of what's going on? The issue is, have my doubts that DraftKings is going to be offering $100K up to the top every single week. This kind of could be the Super Bowl of what we see in terms of guaranteed prize pools at the very top end. Like next week, it could be $20K at the top. And this is a $12 tournament, $100,000 at the top, and you can max enter it $150. I'm not really a max player, but I was thinking about using the tools at Run the Sims, generating 150 lineups and just going YOLO on this. Because I feel like because I have the tools, regardless of how great the projections are versus what they're going to be in 3 weeks, I still feel like I have a huge edge on the competition if I'm going to do that, if legit people don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and you should feel that way. And for folks who the 150 might be a little overwhelming or intimidating or cost prohibitive, there's also some really good tournaments out there for $1 players or $5 players. So make sure you go check those out. But we've done everything we can to make the user experience as easy as possible, so you can get the types of lineups it is that you want. So, one really great way to do that is go and generate some stacks and, play around by, making sure that you're, getting at least 3 or 4 players from each team. And you can do that really easily with our max players per team, min max players per team feature. So there's a lot of really cool ways that you can do that. And then just let the projections do the heavy work. And I will say that they will be in a constant state of flux over the next few days. I mean, I'm trying to utilize, what I'm seeing here to influence what we're going to be expecting from projections. But yeah, there's no reason not to go ahead and I'm emptying the clip myself this week to get the players in the lineups that I want.
Do you think that's wise, Cody, that you have this giant prize pool, you don't expect it to be there? We know that the projections will be better in 2 weeks' time, but do you just empty the clip at it right now, knowing that even if your numbers aren't great, they're still better than everyone else's, and this is a huge advantage?
I'm still undecided at this point. I'm with Justin. I'm ready to completely unload the clip on week 1. And we saw this happen with the XFL. There was a lot of hype going into the XFL. I think they opened with 100K to first in that league as well. And then it quickly dropped after that, after it overlaid in week 1. So we will likely, if this overlays, probably see 50K in week 2. Hopefully we can maintain kind of a 50K to first flagship GPP on DraftKings. I would be pleased with that. I think if I have a lean at this point, and I haven't registered for any contests yet, I think I'm leaning on holding back on a full-blown 150, believe it or not, just because I think we're going to have them be in much better shape come week 2, week 3, when we can see these teams. And I know maybe that's a bad take. As much work as I put in, I think I've got better projections than the field is going to be using. And I know it feels the same, especially being down there and having more information. But we just don't know very much at all from a league level, from a team level. from a player level. We just don't have very much information to go off of right now. And completely unloading the clip with incomplete information is pretty tough to do. But I will be mixing it up plenty. I just haven't fully committed to the 150 MME on DraftKings yet.
That's where I'm sitting right now. And I'm not usually a 150 max player, but I was thinking, like, do I kind of press my advantage here that I know that I'll have against 95% of the field, because I'll have tools, I'll have projections done by a guy who's there like looking over a fence with binoculars, hoping not to get arrested, and trying to talk to people in the lobby, using the sun as a shield. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we really like, Justin. Like, that's the extra 2% here that's going to go into these projections. I mean, Lord knows if they're going to turn out to be good or not. And like Cody said, the more you let them mature, the more information we have, the better they're off they're going to be. So I'm in this like weird in the middle type state. Like, do I want to go 150 and invest $2,000 into this? I mean, that's way more than that's exponentially more than I usually play on a DraftKings slate. But there are times in the past, and even as something as simple, Cody, as a few weeks ago on Prize Picks, that they were offering this over-under on hole, I think it was 16 at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. I put $4,000 into it. I was like, this is a terrible line. The more money I can get down on this, the better. And it just won. Everyone won who ended up playing it. Now, I don't think it's necessarily going to go that way for this, but even if I play 50 lineups, do you think that's a good enough hedge where I'll still have an advantage over the field?
Well,
yeah.
Here's what I would. Oh, go ahead, Cody. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think especially if you're mixing it up in that $12 tournament, I don't really want to be going against all these 150 maxers if I'm not 150 maxing myself and having a good player pool, good representation of the guys that I want to have. So if you're someone that, just wants to mix it up a few entries, I would suggest some of the other tournaments, maybe some of the single entry tournaments, which there are plenty of this week. But if you're in that range, 50, 75, 100, I think you're still going to get a good player pool, get good exposures, and have an opportunity for some of those lineups to filter up the leaderboard. So again, if I'm not 150 maxing, I'll be pretty close, just trying to decide where the right level is for week one.
Yeah, Justin, you hit on it. There's a 150 entry mini max that is 50 cents per entry, so you could play into that. There's obviously the $12 large one with 100K up top. That's going to cost you $12 per entry to get into. But there's a bunch of 20 max as well. There's a $1 20 max. There's a $3 20 max. There's even just a Sunday only, it seems, $12 that only has 25K to first, but that seems to be another pretty good tournament as well. So you can kind of pick and choose, but like I said, I'm just kind of in the middle right now, whether I want to go all in, all out, or like I said, try to knowing, like, I mean, when people count cards in blackjack, I mean, it's not like it's a guaranteed win when you go in, but you know that you finally have an advantage. Let's try to maximize this. Do you feel like that's the case here?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you still want to have smart bankroll management here, because there's no guarantee that, whatever the chalk among the industry ends up hitting. And, that's certainly within the realm of possibilities. And while, say like we're working really hard to make our projections, they might win over the long run, but in a single week, anything happens. And so definitely want to be smart and don't play above your head. There's some good stuff out on some of the other sites as well. So, be sure you're checking around and see if you can find something that maybe suits your needs a little bit. But yeah, I think, finding those 20 max tournaments are a really good way to do it.
Cody, how do you leverage content within the industry for things like this? Because I found this in golf and golf's a pretty big sport, but it's still a pretty niche community when it comes down to people. There's like 3 different places where you can go to for information, and that's kind of it. And that's what we're seeing right now with the USFL. No one has really taken a huge lead on this outside of Establish the Run, outside of Run the Sims. I saw my good pal, shout out to him, happy birthday, Jeff Radcliffe over at FTN. He put out projections for this. Those are legitimately the only 3 sources of information that I found on any of this. So whatever you write on Establish the Run, how big of an influence do you think that will have on the 150 maxers coming out right now, and with only having the 3 places around where you can go look for stuff?
That's the tough balancing act, especially this week when we don't have information. And Justin's going to be putting out stuff. I know RotoGrinders also has a product out for projections. If FTN has a product, people are going to be using those. I think going into this week, we know that the field is going to try and get access to projections. Unfortunately, those projections might not be very good in week one. Our projections are only as good as the inputs that are going into them. And the inputs right now are a whole lot of guesswork. So I will say this, if people are using Establish the Run's projections and content and Run the Sims projections and content, and you land on a lot of the same guy that ends up being pretty heavily chalk in a week where we know very little, then that's one of those places in large field tournaments that I think you could pretty easily steer clear of. We could come out of week 2 looking like complete idiots because all of our projections were wrong. And if the field's going to own some of these guys at really high rates and the stuff that we put out influences that, then you're going to have to kind of steer clear of that. So it's one thing to keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about in terms of, plays being better than one another, it's all going to be pretty even in week 1 just because we don't know a whole lot. But what we say is going to influence ownership too. So keep that in mind when you're playing these large field tournaments where you're trying to get, first out of 25,000 entries.
We have the Showdown simulator, Justin, over at Run the Sims, and that's already up and running right now, so you can go check it. I'm on it, actually, at the moment for the New Jersey at Birmingham game on Saturday night. Who are these people, and what do they do, and why should I put them in my lineup? Should I a 25% captain's leverage on Alex Magoo? Mr. Magoo, apparently, is the best play on the slate.
Yeah, he looks like a pretty strong play, honestly. And, maybe in a situation like this, traditional Showdown rules may not apply because we don't know enough about the players. It'd be more so being directionally accurate on the who of what you're getting in there. So, yeah, I'm already looking forward to having way too much Alex Magoo, him throwing an early interception, me making a really bad joke about Mr. Magoo can't see. It's all really stacking up already. But, yeah, he looks like the locked-in starter at quarterback for Birmingham. The other quarterback is Jamar Davis-Smith. I don't believe we'll see any of him, or if it is, like maybe they just do a little goal line package with him. Like we see that in the NFL. We saw, sort of like Trey Lance was used last year at times, where the guy might come in just a little bit towards the goal line for a different type of skill set. At the running back position, looks like Tony Brooks-James is going to be the number 1 running back for the Stallions. And, like Cody, said, a lot of these are simply implied off of the draft capital that was applied to these guys. In other words, what we're saying there is they just did a brand new draft, start to finish, of all these players. And, the order in which these players were selected kind of gives you a sense of how much the team valued them, at least going into that period. Now, obviously, they've been at these teams for a month. There's an opportunity for guys to separate themselves or climb the depth chart. But, sort of the null hypothesis here is that Tony Brooks-James should be the starter there. And at receiver, really like Victor Bolden Jr. I think Vic Bolden could be possibly one of the premier wide receivers in the league this year. His sort of rising tide lifting all boats will be his wagon being hitched to Alex Magoo and what he can do. But I'm pretty positive on Birmingham right this second. I think compared to a lot of others out there, I think they could be a pretty competent offense.
Yeah, I'm looking through the optimal results, Cody, with all of this and just checking out the DraftKings points, and it does lean pretty heavily towards Birmingham with the number 1 and 2 players on the slate being Alex Magoo and Tony Brooks-James, the quarterback and the running back from their same team. Then you have Mike Weber on the other side. New Jersey's running back is being the 3rd highest scoring per the projections right now. Obviously, if Justin is looking out there and sees the first team reps, and all of a sudden, who's some jabroni we have on this team? CJ Marable ends up being the starting running back for Birmingham over Tony Brooks-James. Obviously, that will be affected in the projections. But when you're thinking through Showdown, I don't even know if you're going to play Showdown or thought about Showdown for this, but it does seem like with similar rules that we have to NFL that at least we can kind of construct some ideas in our head knowing the strategy going into it that works in the NFL. Do you think that those rules will apply to Showdown for USFL, or do we just like, hey, this one team's good, use those guys?
I think some conventional wisdom can be thrown out the window when we're playing USFL Showdown, at least early on until we have more information. But I do think that some of the conventional rules that we've talked about in the past will still apply. If Alex Magoo is the best projected play on that slate, and I think I would agree with that sentiment, then you're probably going to want to pair him up with 1 or 2 pass catchers in the flex, right? If he's your captain and he's going to throw a couple of touchdowns and be the optimal captain, somebody's going to have to catch those. So, Victor Bolden is a guy that I agree with Justin on. He's projected for the highest target share in our stuff on the Birmingham Stallions roster. but maybe someone further down the board catches a touchdown that we don't have projected for nearly as high of a target share. So those are the type of things that we would do in the NFL that I think will also apply here. But when we have these thinned out rosters, when we think a lot of guys are going to end up playing just because of necessity, so we don't get guys running out there and injured, I think you can do some things that are a little bit different than you would for NFL Showdown.
What do you think, Justin, is going to be the move? Like, I'm looking at that slate right now. Like, the fifth highest projected guy in this game is the Birmingham wide receiver Marlon Williams at the moment. He's $400 in Showdown. On the main slate on DraftKings, he's $3,000. Like, is it just like these salaries are kind of irrelevant sometimes because they were made without any sort of context of the depth chart?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, nobody knows what they're doing, including the people at DraftKings setting pricing here. They're using draft capital to probably set some of these prices as well. You know, Marlon Williams was a guy who I think might actually be a starter in this offense, despite not being heavily drafted. So, like, as you're making teams, and usually, like for NFL slate, it feels so uncomfortable to leave more than say $1,000 on the table. Here, I'll have lineups that might leave $10,000 on the table. I mean, it's just going to be absolutely absurd. It's not going to be a matter of fitting in all the best, high salary guys just under the wire. It's a great opportunity to get unique. However, the slate here is pretty small, honestly. So you're not competing against 300,000 people like you are for a Monday Night Football game. Opening night Showdown is pretty slim pickings.
It is, but it still has $2,000 to the top in the $10 tournament, if that's the way that you wanted to go about it. That seems to be the biggest contest that they're offering at this time. Let's see.
The late Sunday night one, Pat, actually has, I think, was it 10K to first, if I'm not mistaken?
Let's see here. Total prizes. Yeah, they're $10,000 to first place, only 3,500 entries. I would assume that's the one. Do you think we'll have a bit more context of what happens in this league by that time? Or do you think that 3 games happening before it is just kind of like, yeah, those could have been whatever. It has no context on this. Or do you think that we can learn something from how the weird rules play out, how these teams look, the types of playbooks that they might be running with, whether they're vanilla or maybe they're secretly more advanced than we think?
I think there will be... Go ahead, Justin.
Okay. If you're paying attention, yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
I think exactly. Like if all of these games are playing at different times, so we're going to have a full, 3-game sample by the end of Sunday's slate to kind of take away our teams using this onside kick rule. Our teams going for 2 and 3. Can we apply anything there? And then what do the offensive playbooks look like? Justin thinks it's going to be pretty vanilla. I think it's going to be pretty vanilla. Maybe they come out and start doing some wild stuff from the jump. But 3-game sample, these offenses are obviously very different than the ones that we'll see before them. But I think we'll have kind of just a general sense of the way the league's going to play out by the end of Sunday.
So let's try to hammer down on what teams we expect to do what well and do what poorly. I think you kind of hit on this, that Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and New Orleans, Cody, we think are going to be some of the pass heavier or at least pass efficient teams out there.
Yeah, I think we're in, there's pretty much a consensus at this point going into week 1 that those are the 3 teams to be targeting, at least among people kind of in our bubble, the Bandits, the Stars, and the Breakers. And those are the 3 teams that we have with the highest pass rate in our projections and also project to be the most efficient as well. So high yards per attempt, high touchdown rate. So these are the teams that I think that we should be targeting, and hopefully the field doesn't catch on too much, but I think these are the teams that we should be targeting going into Saturday's slate.
And Justin, that reflects the overall odds at DraftKings Sportsbook in terms of futures. Tampa Bay is the favorite to win this championship at plus 425. The Breakers of New Orleans are 5-1. Philadelphia is 6-1. But the Michigan Panthers are plus 450. What do we expect them to do on offense? Are they going to be like a super run-heavy team?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think all these teams will try to hashtag establish it pretty early just to take some pressure off the offensive line and the quarterback so that the passing game can succeed. I mean, but it's tough. I mean, we've seen these leagues in the past, and it's tough to get the ground game going. But, I mean, that's something you just kind of have to at least make a notable attempt at, or else your quarterback will get smoked all game long. But I think Michigan is, I see it sort of as 3 tiers here, where Michigan and Birmingham are kind of in this middle tier. And, the teams that you're probably wanting to avoid are the New Jersey Generals, the Pittsburgh Maulers, and the Houston Gamblers. Those three teams I just have no confidence in whatsoever. So, as I'm thinking about how to construct lineups and, especially as I'm thinking about 150 sets, I'm thinking about those other 5 teams. But Michigan, I think, might be slept on a little bit. Shea Patterson, obviously the first overall pick in this draft. So he's he's the reason that their odds are inflated right this second. And so there's a lot of faith there that he can get that team going. They've got a pretty talented receiving core with Lance Lenore and Jeff Badette, a couple guys who we've heard in NFL and XFL circles over the past couple of years. Badette's like the wheels guy, like a sub 4.3 40 kind of guy. Lance Lenore, you may remember that name vaguely from his time on the Cowboys. So he's got weapons. And say what you will about Jeff Fisher. He's probably the best coach in the league. The guy's got legitimate NFL experience. So I'm maybe a little higher on the Panthers than most.
What do you make of it here, Cody? You said like Pittsburgh, you just project to be bad on paper. They don't look good.
The frustrating thing about Pittsburgh is I like Kyle Lauletta, and maybe Justin has some inside takes having met him in person now, but I actually like Kyle Lauletta as a quarterback, and he's shown well in NFL preseason. But you look at their offensive coaching staff. Kirby Wilson was a 29-year NFL veteran as just a running backs coach. And their offensive coordinator was last an offensive coordinator at D3 Juanita College, where his offenses couldn't crack 13 points per game and still ran at a 55% clip. So when you talk about establishing it, like this Maulers team is going to live up to the billing. I doubt even, losing by double digits as I project they will against this Tampa Bay Bandits team. I doubt they're going to crack a 50% pass rate. I will push back a little bit on the Panthers because similar situation. Jeff Fisher's been out of football for all intents and purposes for the last 6 years. I don't think he's been sitting on his couch thinking about how he can run an innovative offense in this pro style league. And then you look at their offensive coordinator in Eric Marty, a guy whose offense is so good that he has $39.99 DVDs available on CoachTube. I just don't trust this offense a whole lot. He was at Grambling State. His offense has struggled at Grambling State in his 1 year as offensive coordinator there. Still didn't get up in terms of pass rate. So I think that this Panthers team is going to be a little bit more run heavy. I would put them kind of just a shade above that rung of, the Gamblers, the Generals, and the Maulers. But I still think that they're going to struggle to be effective on offense.
Well, that just sounds like we should be taking Stevie Scott III in our running back spot then, doesn't it?
It's going to be tough. These running backs, 3 backfields, I think are going to be pretty much by committee. So I think that we're going to be looking at these backfields that just have 2 backs available, and we can project close to a 50% rush share for, whichever one in the offense looks like it's going to separate. So I'm looking at these teams that just have 2 backs. I'm not trying to, parse through these 3-man backfields and figure out which one's going to separate.
Justin, how do you think we go about optimally constructing a lineup here? Obviously, there's going to be many different ways to do it, and we don't know any of this information yet, but we're going to be playing this. We should probably try to guess of how this is going to work. Cody had mentioned the complete just onslaught of one team because you can play up to 4 receivers and a quarterback. Do you want to have obviously you want to stack one of the teams. Do you want to have a bring back on the other side, or would you be more comfortable identifying the sort of 3 offenses that you like and want to be a bit more pass heavy and just kind of do a QB, wide receiver stack for one of them and maybe a wide receiver play on that team, not necessarily the team they're playing against?
Yeah, I would say don't force the bring back. We're really just looking to identify who the right players are, even at this point. As we move through the season, that'll become a bit more important. For now, I think it's simply jamming, play the best players, right? Always a tried and true principle in DFS if you know who the best players are in advance. But I would say don't try to force those bring back situations. Instead, maybe identify well, go ahead and maybe set some rules where you're getting a lot more receivers than running backs to start with. Those guys in PPR formats are just going to accumulate so many more points. The odds that a running back is super heavily involved, you're really betting on a touchdown there. We're not going to see, an Alvin Kamara situation where a guy is getting, 15 rush attempts and then also another 8 targets in the passing game. I just don't really see that panning out. Not with this league. not with the fact that running backs have to last for 10 plus weeks to make it through the end of the season on a super thin roster. So yeah, I think don't force your bringbacks. Try to play as many guys from a same team as possible. Not only does that raise your floor, but it also kind of raises your ceiling a bit in the situation where that particular team is the one that you really needed. And then it helps you cover a few more bases. You know, even if you don't get the guy who has the touchdown, well, if you played 4 guys from the same team, then, you know, probably you landed on the one who did. And I'm not expecting there to be a ton of touchdowns in this league. So, you know, landing on those right guys is going to be super important.
How do you think we pick our running back here? You kind of alluded to it. Try to focus down, Cody, on 2-man backfields. Hopefully you pick right. But is the running back spot actually just a place to not necessarily punt, but take the cheap end of the split and hope you get lucky?
I think you can in some cases. Now, week 1's going to be a little bit unique because I think this is pretty much a pick 'em. I'm sure Justin would agree. This is basically their salaries don't exist for week 1. I think one of the better running back plays on the slate is like 3,300 in TJ Logan, and he's going to be one of those guys that could separate. The 2-man backfields that we're looking at right now are in Tampa Bay with the Bandits. We have BJ Emmons projected for a good lion's share of the carries there. And then the other one would be with those Maulers, who we think are going to be, you know, slightly inefficient, but are going to run quite a bit. They brought in Madre London and also drafted Garrett Groshek. Those are their 2 running backs. So if we can get a feel on which one of those guys is going to separate in that backfield, I think that guy is going to be, one of the players that we should be targeting to fill that one running back spot. But I'm in full agreement with Justin here that we should most likely be using one running back, especially in these large field tournaments. And maybe in cash, we can kind of identify in one of those flex spots another running back that feels a little bit safer for their floor. But in these large field tournaments where we're chasing big prizes, we want to be on these wide receivers.
Any idea of what to do with defense? Just whatever's left? Who are guys not playing? Is this a good time to use like the ETR ownership projections, Cody?
I think so. Yeah. If there's going to be a single defense that gets out of hand in terms of how often the field is rostering them, then we should steer very clear of that. That's been evident in NFL. That's been evident in XFL. It's going to be pretty obvious here too. I will say that looking at quarterback play on the other side is going to be a good indicator of a defense that we should roster. But we also want to take our defenses against teams that we project to pass a lot, because we want our defenses to have attempts at sacks and strip sacks and, fumble returns for touchdowns and INTs. We don't want to roster our defense against a team that's just going to be running all game, because they're not going to have opportunities to rack up points. But yeah, look at ownership. Try and steer clear of the most chalky defenses. We know ownership is not a good indicator of DraftKings points scored. And then look at teams that are going to be playing against opposing teams that are throwing often, so we get chances to rack up those points on the defensive side.
So from everything that I've processed from the both of you, talking about this league, talking about the players, talking about the coaches, the offense, and the styles, it does appear like this Philadelphia-New Orleans game might be the one to just overload on.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that for sure. That game features 2 of the best offenses, we're quite sure, in the league. No need to super overthink this. Maybe if you're wanting to get different, maybe go a little bit further down the depth chart than you think other people might. But I think just construction-wise, people don't know what to do. So by simply just stacking up on that game, and maybe there's only a 7-man roster here. Maybe 6 of the 7 players in your lineup are coming from that one game. It's going to make you super exposed there. And if that's the one game that ends up going 35-28, while all the others, and I should probably rethink those common numbers, they're not going to be as big of a deal anymore based on the point after system. But if that's the one game that just went nuclear, then yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense and helps you get a lot of pieces. And it makes it almost where you can't miss if you sort of cover all your bases with those 2 teams.
Yeah, do you think that's probably the move, that game, and just trying to figure out every different combination there, Cody?
We saw this happen a lot with the XFL with the Houston Roughnecks. Justin talked about earlier. It was PJ Walker, it was Cam Phillips, and then it was some other guy, basically. And you could roster that some other guy, and even if he didn't explode, as long as you had PJ Walker and Cam Phillips in your lineup, you probably won. In fact, I think they were the winning combination on 4 out of the 5 weeks in the XFL shortened season. So we get that same situation here where it's Brian Scott, one guy, and another guy. You can take that poor score from the second guy as long as you get the eruption from the other guy that you roster. I think you're going to see that happen quite a bit in this league, certainly in week 1, where if you roster Brian Scott, he's the optimal quarterback. And then he has one, wide receiver one performance from, say, somebody like Devin Gray, but you also roster Brennan Eagles as the second wide receiver, and he only puts up 6. You're going to be pretty happy about that. So I'm in full agreement here with Justin in this game being kind of the optimal game to stack if you're looking for a game stack, and then finding other rosters to onslaught this Tampa Bay Bandits team, which we also project to be pass happy and efficient as well, but not necessarily as concerned with bringing it back on the Mauler's side.
So my Brian Scott, Jordan Sewell, Devin Gray, Brennan Eagles, DeAndre Overton lineups are absolutely going to crush this weekend?
Exactly. You nailed it. Lineup construction is done now.
Do you think that we need to factor in running backs into these offenses as pass catchers at all, Cody?
Not near as much as I would in the NFL with the quarterback, running back, wide receiver stacks that we can get away with. I think the running back target shares on the offenses that are going to be pass heavy are going to be minimal because the strength of the rosters on these teams is at the wide receiver position. And for the Stars, I think they have a good pass catching tight end as well. So I don't think that the running backs are going to factor in as much in the passing game. Happy to be proven wrong there because I would like to see some pass catching running backs that we can use in that spot to fill in future weeks. But I think going into this, the strength of these rosters, especially on the pass happy teams, are in their wide receiver cores.
Are you thinking that Philadelphia has a good tight end because you looked at these two guys' names and you're like, oh my God, this is the best name combination of any tight end room in history? You can either have Bug Howard for the Philadelphia Stars, or you can have, bear with me on this one, Artavius Lynn? Is that I'm guessing on that one. Does that sound right?
You're really close. It's Artavius Lynn, and those guys might not even be the best names in the tight end room. They have a guy that they picked up in Pro Wells as their third tight end. So Bug Howard, Pro Wells, and Artavius Lynn. Of those three, Bug Howard is definitely the guy that projects as a pass catcher. I highly encourage you guys, after you're done watching this show, go stay on YouTube, go check out Philadelphia Stars quarterback Brian Scott highlights. Just Google Brian Scott TSL highlights. He just loves throwing contested catch balls to guys that are massive. And that's evident in this wide receiver room and in this tight end room, because all of these guys are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". So you're going to see on Sunday a lot of balls thrown very high in the air for very big individuals to go up and catch them.
Justin, do you agree with Cody about the unders in these games, that there still might be room for the under to come in pretty easily in a lot of these games?
There could be. I think probably 3 out of the 4 will hit the under. We just won't know which one the fourth one is. I would lean, obviously that Bandits game as breaking that. But I think they're pretty comfy right now. But if you wanted to fire up a little round robin on all 4 of the unders, I think that could be a pretty decent little bet.
Yeah, you're reading my mind. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, can I play a round robin where if I get 3 of the 4 correct, I'm looking good? Because all 4 unders together, Cody, at DraftKings Sportsbook right now pays almost 11-1 if it comes through.
We saw this happen in the XFL. 41 points was the average score through 5 weeks. And I would liken this very similarly in the USFL to the way things played out in the XFL in terms of quarterback play, coaching competency, level of time together. And then you have to factor in, we're coming into week 1. These guys have only had 2 weeks of actual training camp together. In fact, Justin's been in Alabama almost as long as these teams have been in Alabama. So we're going to get guys that just haven't played football together, and a coaching staff that's trying to install an entire offense, in 2 weeks. Now, granted, they had some time doing Zoom calls after they were drafted and whatnot, but you're going to get some sloppy play, and the football is going to be pretty ugly. Round robin, all 4 of those unders. I think there's still a little bit of room. Obviously, there's at 51, 53, 55 where they opened at Fox Bet, much better numbers to take the unders on. But I think that these totals should probably be pegged closer to 41 and a half. So there's a hair of margin there if you're looking to get some action on the totals.
I think that's the route that I'm going to take here. I think even in the first game, just to get some action down here, maybe go Birmingham money line. We go Birmingham money line to beat the New Jersey Generals under 42.5. What the hell does that pay? It pays something. 2 times? 2 times my money here? No. Apparently it won't let me do that.
Yeah, that should turn your $10 into what, $30 or something like that. That's not bad.
Yes, it's not the. Unfortunately, you cannot parlay those two things at DraftKings Sportsbooks. You can do all the unders, but you can't do the spreads and the totals. I'm sure somewhere will allow you to do these things on USFL if you look hard enough. All right. RunTheSims.com/Mayo will get you 10% off. That will include all of the USFL game simulations, Showdown, lineup creator, lineup generator, optimizer, which you can customize, and the player prop tool. So if we get some player props on the go, then you can run the sims on each player and see their range of outcomes to find out if it's a good bet or a bad bet, even against the juice that you can put in on any of these. So I highly recommend it. Get that advantage against the field right now. RunTheSims.com/Mayo for that 10% off. So you get 10% off, $99. It's saving you. Fire that extra $10 onto a bet for all the unders and turn that into the price of the package itself. Boom. Easy way to do it. Cody, what do you have going on every week at Establish the Run for USFL content?
It seems crazy, but we're going to have projections for every player in every game. We'll have ownership projections for the main slate and the showdown slates that we talked about earlier. We will have tiered top plays, which will take into account all of the projection related stuff and our feel for comfortability, confidentiality in terms of the inputs that go into the model and how good we feel about those. Tiered top plays for how confident we are in those guys. We'll have a weekly live show with me and Levitan and some rotating guests from the ETR crew. And then I'll be in Discord answering questions, letting you guys know where we are in terms of inputs on guys for projections. And then we'll also be updating depth charts. So if there's stuff that happens throughout the season, we'll try and keep that up to date because that's going to be just a big, a valuable resource for us as we try to learn all these players.
Sounds pretty good. Justin, runthesims.com. How you say you're going to update these up basically until kickoff with the information that you're finding. Do you think this is going to be a huge edge for us here with you with the binoculars?
I sure do hope so. And I can't beg you enough to please buy a subscription so I can afford some sunscreen for the left side of my face. I was in the shade when we first started, and I've just been getting torched for the last 45 minutes here, Pat. And we desperately need your business over at Run the Sims. But no, it's going to be a really good product. I mean, this is something we've worked hard at. We've made even some improvements on the simulator since the NFL season. So those are all live. You'll actually be the first people to get to play with it. For USFL, you can essentially create the types of lineups you want based on construction. It's all really slick. And I think we've made a lot of really good progress. And I couldn't be more happy with the product and really excited to stick around a little bit later to figure out who the general starting quarterback is going to be. Who knew? Yeah,
there we go. And then we can get the updated projections. Boom. And we can start firing off some of these lineups. And once again, it's $100,000 to first place on DraftKings this weekend for USFL. So you may as well take your shot now. Get the tools, get the projections, get the lineup builder, get the simulations, everything that you need to do it for USFL. RunTheSims.com/Mayo gets you that 10% off. Cody, I don't know if you saw this while we were talking, that Sammy Watkins signed with the Green Bay Packers. Did you notice this?
I thought you were going to say Sammy Watkins signed with the Tampa Bay Bandits because that would have been a big get for them.
Is he their number one now? Is he better than Lazard?
God, I don't know. At this point, man, that receiving core is just a disaster. What is going on in Green Bay? Dare I say I feel bad for Aaron Rodgers?
I don't know about that. Justin, when thinking about how you project this stuff out and you're thinking about target shares amongst basically all we got right now, we got Lazard, Tunyon, and now we're going to throw in Sammy Watkins into this mix. Do you just project Sammy Watkins for 90% of the market share week one because that's probably going to be it for the season?
I mean, that may be it. It's going to be really tough to figure out what to do with that. That's a lot to absorb here on the fly. I don't think he's better than Alan Lazard at this point in his career, right? I mean, Sammy Watkins looks absolutely slow, just completely unreliable. And, I think we're heading into Alan Lazard as a wide receiver one season.
That's crazy. All right. Well, Cody, thank you for the time. We might have to hit you up next week after we have a bit more information, you and Justin, to figure this out. But obviously, Justin needs to go stalk Mike Weber to figure out if he's truly number one on the whatever the hell team he plays for, the New Jersey Generals depth chart in the backfield. So maybe we can win those sweet, sweet USFL bucks. Who knows? I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me at the PME. Smash the like to the episode. Give me your winner of the USFL down in the comment section. And make sure to sub to Mayo Media Network and go get your sub to runthesims.com right now to give yourself that advantage. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience.
I can't believe you're there.
It makes no sense. I think I'm currently getting no-showed by the Generals, by the way, which is really pissing me off. Now I got to figure out somewhere else to go.
You got
Freeman.
You got snubbed by the New Jersey Generals?
It seems that way. I'm just hanging out here at Miles College where they've been practicing, and nobody here today. But I did get a nice morning practice in with the Philadelphia Stars, so you got a good look behind the curtain there. Got a good read on the tight end situation there, you know?
Who's it looking like? Is it your guy Bud Starr, whatever the hell that guy's name was?
Yeah, Bug Howard. He's switched to number 11, so we already got a jersey swap situation going here. Bug Howard
man.
looking solid. When Pro Wells came in, they gave Wells 84, which was Bug's number. And but yeah, Wells is running clearly ahead of Artavius Lynn. Lynn was funny. So yesterday I was at Panthers, and they just mixed in bodies constantly. Quarterback, running back, it was really hard to get a read. The Stars, they have very clear units, so to speak. And so, it looked like, Wells and Howard are almost like co-starters, but different packages, so to speak. But the other dude's sort of way behind. But Sewell's going to be a beast. He's probably going to be a guy I have just an absolute ton of. I
love that. Hey, I got to ask you on the Maulers, because we have we're in agreement. I looked through your projections. We're in agreement on a lot of stuff, but the Maulers, I have Groshek for a lion's share of the carries, and you've got Madre London, who I want to give a lion's share of the carries to. Is Madre the guy?
When I talked to Loletta yesterday, I asked him about the running back situation, and a twinkle in his eye lit up when he talked about Madre London.
Oh, shit.
He's really excited about it. So he's like, Groshek's going to be a part of it too, but Madre is really good, So anyway, that I kind of took that as all the indicator as I could hope to have as Madre being the guy. And I wrote up a Prize Picks article today, Pat. I wasn't sure whether I could even plug that on your show.
Yeah, go for it.
But yeah, I Prize Picks put out USFL lines, and some of them are kind of fishy. So especially the quarterback numbers.
Overs or unders?
Yeah, a mix. Like they've got Shea Patterson projected for 10 fantasy points or something, and they've got Clayton Thorson for 21, and it's like, geez, these should be opposites of each other. So obviously not guaranteed, but
yeah, where can everyone find those?
It's written up as a content piece. If you go to runthesims.com/USFL, it'll be the first thing that pops up.
All right, I'll throw that down in the description of the podcast and video.
Okay.
By the way, if people didn't know out there, they can use code MMN at prizepicks.com to get themselves a match deposit of up to $100. That's, you get yourself that $100 and see if we can have a huge advantage. How long do you think, I don't know if it's going to be this week, next week, or the week after, until that Prize Picks tool on Run the Sims is going to be available for USFL?
Yeah. Hopefully soon. Right now, all eyes are on this optimizer, but then we should get into the other one here quickly.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, guys, for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Enjoyed it, fellas. See ya.
See you later.